This video was brought to you by Skillshare. Today, Russia and North Korea sign a mutual defense pact, a gambling scandal erupts during the UK election, and a legal battle begins in Louisiana over the 10 Commandments. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Thursday the 20th of June, 2024. This week, Vladimir Putin has made headlines around the world following his state visit to North Korea and his first trip to its capital, Pyongyang, in 24 years. The main agenda of this trip was to seek closer relations between the two countries and help them reduce their dependence on the West. As a result, yesterday they signed a mutual defense pact, which includes a clause requiring the two countries to come to each other's aid if either is attacked. Now, the pact itself hasn't been publicly released yet, so there's a lot of ambiguity concerning the exact framing and terminology used in the pact. But many political analysts suspect that this pact could cause a dramatic shift in the strategic balance in Northeast Asia, placing Russia behind North Korea, with South Korea backed by the US. Pyongyang and Moscow have been deepening their relations following months of ramped-up diplomacy, with the two countries having exchanged 18 senior government and other delegations so far this year. In justification of this pact, though, Putin commented that the West's supply of long-range weapons to Ukraine, namely the F-16 fighters, which have the ability to strike Russia, breached major agreements. Putin has also argued in this light that Russia does not exclude itself from the development of military technical cooperation with North Korea. And North Korea has also been a firm supporter of Moscow in its war in Ukraine. While Beijing, Pyongyang's main political and economic benefactor, hasn't yet commented on the pact, Western leaders, such as NATO Secretary General, quickly expressed their concerns. Their main worry is that this pact underscores Moscow's aid in helping to build Pyongyang's missile and nuclear programs. In fact, NBC News last night reported that US intelligence officials believe that Putin is providing North Korea with nuclear submarine and ballistic missile technology in exchange for arms for his war in Ukraine. And what's raised alarms in Washington even further is that these ballistic missiles are intercontinental and are capable of striking the US. Even if they're short range, they could still be used in the event of a large-scale conflict with South Korea. The US has also accused Pyongyang of providing ballistic missiles and artillery shells that Russia has used in its war with Ukraine, although Moscow and Pyongyang have denied any weapons transfers. There's more on the way, but remember to subscribe and ring the bell for more daily briefing tomorrow. Plus, if you want to support the channel like Haldra here, then consider joining the new TLDR membership program for just $1.99. Here in the UK, another betting scandal has overshadowed the Tories' general election campaign. Lara Saunders, the wife of the Conservative Director of Campaigning, Tony Lee, who's also standing for election in Bristol North West, is being investigated by the Gambling Commission over a bet that she placed on the timing of the general election. This is the third election bet-related scandal in just the last week, after the UK's gambling regulator launched a probe into Rishi Sunak's closest parliamentary aide last week, and a police officer from Sunak's protection was arrested earlier this week. These scandals will likely further damage the Conservative Party's election campaign, which has already been marred by issues like Sunak's decision to leave the D-Day memorial early and Nigel Farage's return to frontline politics. With exactly 2 weeks to go until the general election on the 4th of July, polls are predicting catastrophic results for the Tories, and we'll have to see whether things get even worse for them in the remaining weeks. Next up, the governor of the US state of Louisiana has signed into law legislation that requires every public classroom to display the 10 Commandments, making them the first and only state to have such a requirement. Now, critics of the law have called it blatantly unconstitutional and vow a legal challenge. But Governor Jeff Landry, a Republican, has argued in favor of the law, saying that it'll be valuable for students because if you want to respect the rule of law, you have to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses. Specifically, the law requires the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every classroom of every public elementary, middle, and high school, as well as public college classrooms too. The commandments must be written in a large, easily readable font on a poster no smaller than 11 by 14 inches, and include a 3-paragraph statement claiming that the 10 Commandments were a, quote, prominent part of the American political education system for almost 3 centuries. Opponents of the law, however, including the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, say that the law clearly violates the First Amendment of the Constitution, and a long-standing precedent of the Supreme Court, which 40 years ago overturned a similar statute. But proponents of the law are clearly hoping for a legal battle, with Governor Landry saying, "I can't wait to be sued." This all forms part of a wider campaign from conservative Christian groups to provoke legal challenges, hoping that they will reach the conservative majority Supreme Court. And we'll have to wait and see what happens if it does. Next up, the European Commission has reprimanded France and 6 other EU countries for breaking its budgetary rules, and said that it will open an excessive deficit procedure for the countries. France, Belgium, Italy, Hungary, Malta, Poland, and Slovakia all have deficits, that's the gap between government revenue and spending, of more than 3%, which violates the EU's fiscal rules, which had previously been suspended due to COVID and the Ukraine-linked crises. However, the excessive debt procedure is essentially the opening of discussions between the national governments and the European Commission, aimed at finding ways to reduce their deficits, i.e. rein in spending. In theory, failure to remedy this situation can result in fines, but this has never actually happened in practice. Now, this story is significant for a number of reasons. For starters, this will be the first time that France, whose deficit to GDP ratio is 5.5%, returns to the EU's so-called public spending sin bin since President Macron came to power in 2017. It also comes at a turbulent time for France, which is rapidly approaching legislative elections in which the 2 top parties and alliances, the National Rally and Popular Front, both want to increase spending further and have criticised the EU's fiscal rules. Italy, meanwhile, had the highest deficit to GDP ratio last year, with 7.4%. The Italian government has sought to reassure the EU Commission, saying that we are aware that, given the circumstances we find ourselves in, it's necessary to maintain a responsible approach to planning and managing budget policy. In our final uplifting story today, we discuss the efforts of a group of 80 nature volunteers in Scotland, who have so far collected more than 2.2 million seeds as part of a 3-year rewilding project. The initiative, run by Trees for Life and Woodland Trust Scotland, aims to allow millions of native woodland trees to be grown for rewilding across Scotland, helping to tackle climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. The project focuses on rare tree species from Scotland's surviving fragments of ancient woodland, including on Skye, the Western Isles and Orkney, and from Scotland's west coast temperate rainforest. For context, Scotland is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, tree planting being especially critical for the ancient Caledonian forest in the Scottish Highlands, of which less than 2% remains. In April, a campaign for Scotland to become the world's first rewilding nation was launched by a coalition of 20 organisations, calling on the Scottish Government to commit to nature recovery across 30% of the country. This seed collection will allow young trees to be planted at various sites across Scotland this coming autumn, including Argyll and Bute, Loch Arbor, and the Trossachs. A week or so ago, we announced that we're working on a physical magazine which dives deep into the upcoming UK general election. But it turns out that designing a magazine isn't all that easy. So I headed to Skillshare to take a look through some of their design courses, including the incredibly helpful course, How to Design a Magazine and Learn InDesign, which helped me to, do both things. This means that unlike when I tried to learn InDesign for another never-released project a few years ago, I was guided through the process quickly and efficiently. And this time, the project will actually see the light of day, thanks to Skillshare's incredibly easy-to-follow guides. It's not just that either. You likely already know that Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, and more. But Skillshare can also help take your career or side hustle to the next level, with hundreds of career-focused classes too. That's courses on everything from how to start a business to maximizing your workflow, or even how to grow in e-commerce, another course that I used when building the website that sells the magazine. And the best news is that the first 500 people to use the link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today.